I still expect this to be a football player who's going to contribute to a team or teams for multiple contracts in the NFL. One of the guys who I think is a forgotten name in the edge group this year is San Diego State's Cam Thomas, who we were expecting to see at the Senior Bowl, and then he didn't participate in the event, but he checks in at 6'4", 267, 32.5-inch arms. He's an 81.08 consensus grade for us as a second-round player. And Trey, I remember when you did the write-up on him and you came in, you were like, this dude in that conference could not be blocked. So talk to us a little bit about what you saw on tape that had us so excited. And obviously he's kind of been an out-of-sight, out-of-mind prospect throughout the majority of this process, but there's still some appealing qualities for us that make it hard to forget him completely.
Right. So I think that the quandary is that he was so impactful and so disruptive at that level, right? He made a lot of plays, right? He made a ton of plays. They played him some inside. They played him some outside. I mean, so he made a ton of plays in the pass and the run game. The questions I had were where he plays, because he's not very big, right? So he's probably the size of somebody that can be a 4-3 in, but he's not necessarily fluid enough or have the hips and have the pass rush moves, I think, to excel as a 4-3 in. So if you kick him inside some, that's probably where he's best, but he's not very big, right? So he's in the 260 range. So that's why it would have been good to see him perform at the Senior Bowl against a higher level of competition, which he didn't. So for me, those questions are still there, but undoubtedly, I mean, he was extremely impactful at that level. He made a lot of plays. He was really, really influential and was essentially hard to block.
You guys tell me if you disagree, but I'd put his motor right up there with Aiden Hutchinson.
Yeah, absolutely.
A relentless football player.
I'm a big fan of this player. I think he's not Aiden Hutchinson, but there's some similarities in terms of, one, the motor, but two, he has a rush plan. I mean, he really knows how to attack opposing offensive tackles. The hand use is outstanding. As Dre mentioned, is he the most flexible athlete? Probably not, but I actually think he's best as a 4-3 end because he's also undersized. So I don't think reducing him inside is going to do him any favors in terms of as a run defender. I do think he excels as a run defender playing on the edge. I think he can set the point of attack. He can set the edge. He has good length, good hands. I think he's able to locate the football. He has some range playing laterally. There's a lot to like with this player. And, you know, for a guy who maybe isn't the most athletic, I think he has a pretty good first step. You know, it's respectable. And so I think there's a lot of ways he could win, but at the end of the day, he has motor, he has hands, he plays with good leverage, and he's a guy who I think is still getting better. So, you know, he's obviously in that second tier of edge rushers, but a name that we shouldn't forget come draft night.
My question was, is he a candidate for someone that may be able to add on some weight to kick that in a reduced role inside?
I think that me personally, I think that's his best role, right? I mean, you get him up to 285 and play him, you know, in a 3 or something. I think that's where he is best.
Yeah, I viewed him much in the same light as George Karlaftis, as a guy like we talked about that can threaten the edge, but I'm not sure if they're going to win the edge, right? And they're right on the brink of that 260, 265 weight to where it's like, you know what, can I afford to put 20, 30 pounds on this guy and he can be really good as a, you know, an interior rusher and just, you know, they're physical enough and they play with a good temperament. Like, that's one thing you can't question about Cameron Thomas is that he's a physical football player, right? It's just a matter of fit, and I would kick him inside just to let him take advantage of maybe some of those slower guards who don't have as much length and try to get the best out of them. I'm just with these type of guys, it's all about putting them in the best situation and not forcing anything. Like, at this point, you know, you kind of see what these guys are going to be and what their resume is, and it's about just putting them in situations that they could benefit from.
The name that comes to mind for me for him, and it's probably not a name that's going to move the needle for anybody as a player comp, and certainly not relative to the stratosphere where we have him graded in the second round, but John Simon, who came out of Ohio State, he's played in the league almost a decade now. And he's kind of been like this sturdy, rock solid. He's played in the Belichick-type defenses. He's never been a big sack guy, but he's been a guy who you can put on the front side as the base end. You can stand him up a little bit. He's like a little bit of that tweener-type role. Does a lot of dirty work. And I think about that with Cam Thomas and just how blue collar he is as a player. And, maybe nobody would say, man, I'd love to spend a second-round pick and draft another John Simon. But the dude's played in the league he came in the league in 2013. I mean, we're talking about a decade-long player in the NFL who's played significant snaps for the Houston Texans, the New England Patriots. So that's kind of my worst-case scenario for me if you can't find that permanent home to get him on the field with a high level of consistency is – I still expect this to be a football player who's going to contribute to a team or teams for multiple contracts in the NFL, and that makes him, as a potential top 100 pick, somebody that certainly bears consideration as reflected in his grade of an 81.08.
I think that his best role is how the Cardinals use Zach Allen, right, in a very similar fashion.